This is CD number 2 for Healthy Boundaries. Here's Dr. Norm Wise.
You start off by affirming the relationship. Son, I want you to know that I will forever care about you, love you, pray for you, be on your side. You can call me in the middle of the night, and I'm always here to listen to your struggles. I want you to know I am 100% totally committed to you and always will be, because I love you forever, and I always will. Now, as of 3 months from now, I can no longer pay your rent, because it's really not good for you at 27 to be totally dependent on me. We need to develop a plan, and you need to develop a plan, and I'll be glad to give you, my advice, but you don't have to take it if you don't want to. But you need to develop a plan to where you can be self-sufficient within 12 weeks. And I'm doing that because I'm getting older, and I'm not going to be here forever. And you need to figure out how to function as an independent adult. And I know you can, because you have great gifts, you have great abilities. I believe in those great gifts and the great abilities. And I want you to know that I know this is hard to hear. I know it's simply easier for me to, pay your bills. But it's not really good for you. And so this is tough for me because I love you. But yeah, this is something I think I have prayerfully and carefully thought about this. And I think that this is what would be best. But I understand this is not in any way abandonment or rejection of you. I would never abandon you, never reject you. I'm simply setting a boundary that says, this is all I can give, because I'm limited. Now you see, that's how you communicate it. If you were listening, I would start off with positive affirmation of the strengths of the relationship and the things that are unchanging in the relationship. I then sent the boundary. I said, I will not do something they want me to do, whatever that is. I also relate it, which I should be able to relate it, to what I think is, a benefit for them in that no. And then I come back and I reaffirm my faith that they're going to be fine. Well, you see, that isn't hurt because you've been verbally or emotionally, abusive. See, a boundary doesn't allow you to be abusive to the other person. That's not a boundary. That's one of these. These people would say they have great boundaries, but it's not a healthy relationship, because it's not treating the other person as an adult. And so I want to be treated like an adult, and I want to treat the other person like an adult. But I do have to figure out, and you see, there is no simple answer to your question, because each parent will have to decide where they will set their boundary. And different parents would set boundaries at different, places. A whole group of dynamics. One of which, by the way, if you had a handicapped child who was totally incapable of ever providing for himself, your boundary would have to be in a different place. So you see, be careful too about dictating to other people where they should set their boundaries, because you may not know everything about their circumstances. But if you don't have a place where you've set a boundary, well, that's not healthy, because then you're playing out in some way one of these or both of these. And, so there's this balance. So you see, the whole key is boundaries is in the moment. Just read through the 4 here. Summary: selfishness is where I am God, and the aim of life is to have my will done, and that's why you exist. Codependency is where some other person is God, and I have joy when I do their will on earth. And so I have idolized some other person, and I make that person the center of my life. Martyr is where I see myself sacrificing for the good of other people and gaining, quote unquote, redemption through my sacrifice. In other words, I know if I give enough, eventually they'll get their life together. And again, this is the most common thing for people in deep relationship with addicts. It's very easy for people to get into, some type of addictive personality to try to save those people through being martyrs. And then number 4, parent, is where I know that I am better and brighter than other adults, and therefore, for their good, seek to have power and control over their actions. I mean, I'm only doing this for you. So you see, parents, they have all the, feeling of, I'm really a great person. Both of these can feel, I am really a good person. But this person, does it, they're imposing their will on people and even being abusive in how they get them to do it, intimidating and manipulative, but they do it for the other person's good. And that's what makes them a parent. Yeah.
They think they have all the
And they have all the answers.
all the answers.
They have all the answers. They're infinite, and they know better. They're better and brighter than the other person. By the way, all of us have a tendency to be like that. We normally are always, most of the talk that we have when we're talking about another person with other people, and they're doing something we disagree with, we normally, turn that conversation into, I just can't believe. And then what we really are doing is saying the other person is simply either not as good in character or not as competent in thinking as we are. And of course, in gossip, you have to understand something about gossip. The moment you start talking about another person, most people know that the only way that they're going to get your approval is by you agreeing with them. I'll have people, call up. There was a person who was, being brought up on some ethical charges, which after a period of time they were vindicated and found not guilty. But I had someone call and say, I know that this person is as guilty as all get out and can't be trusted, and on and on and on. And I said, well, have you talked to the person? Oh, there's no use talking to them. They'll just twist everything you say around. And I said, so let me get it right. You've heard one side of the story. You have one person's perspective. You're not going to go to the other person and get their perspective because you have concluded from the first person that this person can't be trusted. And so on the testimony of this one person, you have decided to agree with that person, and I'm assuming you're not only talking to me about this, but you're talking to other people about this. Is that true? Is that what you're doing? Does that seem wise? The one thing I can tell you doing a lot of marriage counseling is this. In every case, the husband has a perspective and the wife has a perspective. And they're under the illusion, by the way, that it's the job of the counselor to tell the other person they're wrong. That's what they think the counselor's there for. This person is obviously better and brighter than you. You should just kind of follow their lead. And it gets quite irritating when, counselors don't do that and, say instead, well, I hear what you're saying and I hear what you're saying. Do you hear what they're saying? And so it's very, very hard, okay? So one of the things is, we do have a tendency, this is to be a parent of other adults. It makes us feel, it helps our self-esteem. It helps us feel like we're in more control of things than we are. Because again, this is reality. Reality is there's only one person on this planet that you have control over. And having control over this person is tough. It'll take all of your energy and mind and wisdom, and that person is yourself. And everybody else on this planet is 100% outside your control. Now, I'm not saying you can't be a good influence on that person. You can. But have you noticed people sometimes don't respond well to good influences? Anybody else notice that? See, people say no to good influence. Influence is not power. Influence is not control. Influence is just influence. It is true that in some environments it's easier to be sane and stable and spiritual and safe than in others. That's true. But actually people can go crazy in any environment. So it's really important for us to understand, that limitation. Okay? So to get boundaries straight, I have to realize, quite honestly, if I'm setting boundary of a codependent, I have to encourage this person to say no to me. Okay? If I know they're in a codependent, hey, listen, I want to know what you feel. I'm not even going to tell you what my opinion is. I want to know your opinion. And they'll start sweating. Because now you've messed up the whole system. You're supposed to say, oh, I think, and they're supposed to echo, oh, I do too, and the universe is fine. But it's not. So you have to encourage this person to get boundaries. Because that's a healthy relationship. Then they'll actually know who they are, and you'll actually know who you are, and you'll have an adult-adult relationship, which is adults have the right to disagree. In good adult relationships, we agree on some things and we disagree on other things. And the world does not end. The universe is not in trouble. Okay? It's fine. There's no rule that says everybody has to agree with you about everything. Or else you can't be happy. Because if that's what it takes for you to be happy, oh, you're in trouble. Because people are either going to have to pretend that they agree with you when they don't, or you're going to get rid of everybody in your life that has an opinion. Okay? A or B, see? So we have to, see, you have to understand the boundaries as to, now for this person, you're going to very much have to say, without yourself becoming selfish, without yourself becoming evil, you have to say, listen, in this particular issue, no, I cannot agree. I have a really bad gut feeling about, I'm just going to no. And that is to help this person come to a realization that they really aren't the center of the universe, that you are an adult and you have a right to say no to them, and other people have a right to say no to them, and they have to get over it. And that's actually helping them to move towards some more emotional maturity.
Getting from everybody else.
We would say, conscience is not necessarily big in the selfish person. Yeah.
No, I think
Selfish people don't feel a whole lot of guilt. They're after power, pleasure, prestige, prosperity, control, power and control. But in other words, the selfish person has pretty well tried to diminish conscience. Jiminy Cricket is muzzled in the selfish person because they value winning more than they value loving. They value winning more than they value loving. They would feel worse about losing than about not loving. Okay? And so that's something inside the selfish person. Now again, everyone in this room has had selfish moments. We've had moments where, our one overriding concern was just, I want to be happy.
Yeah, and then I felt guilty.
Well, and a good person feels,
That
and so the thing is, we usually will have some recovery from our selfishness. And again, these people may have moments of that. Because again, very few times, if a person is 100% selfish, then they really do have a psychological disorder. If they're 100% selfish 100% of the time, then that's psychologically a problem. So most people might, for the most part, but understand the selfish person, by the way, who does have an answer to the conscience, they can simply say, well, I'm not doing this for me, I'm doing it for them. And they can switch hats and go into the parent mode. And they just disguise their will as really for the good of the other person. And therefore they can feel noble. And so, So the conscience, the feeling of conscience will most likely drive the selfish person into the parent, role. Because that's a much more noble description. However, some people really get a philosophy where they really do believe the only purpose of other people, the highest good is my personal peace and affluence. That's a philosophy. And if it is their philosophy, well, then they just are trying to be consistent with their philosophy. So it also, sometimes things are very much, chosen paths. One of the things, of course, is a spiritual boundary. Basically saying no to the devil, saying no to selfishness, saying no to a lack of love, saying no to a lack of compassion, saying no to a lack of respect for yourself, saying no to a lack of respect for others. The devil comes to kill, steal, and destroy. And so all of that darkness that we can find, remember we talked about we're all wicked and the struggle we can have with wickedness, all that struggle. And submitting to God, which is to submit to love. God is love. And so when I submit to the will of God, I have submitted to love. Now it also means I have to define love. And of course we're going to talk some more about, well, sometimes love is not always saying yes. And so we have to be careful here, but that's in fact true. James 4:7-8, the half-brother of Jesus wrote, "Submit yourselves therefore to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you." Indicating, by the way, when we resist this darkness in us, it actually is weaker than we might think it is. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. A double-minded person is not a person that knows what they want. They haven't figured out their boundaries. If you don't know what you want, how do you expect anybody else to know what you want? If you will not say, I'll ask people, well, did you tell them you didn't want that? And over again, they'll say no. I said, well, how did you think they would know that you don't want that? Well, they should just know. They don't just know. They're not mind readers. People look at things from different perspectives. And so if you don't say no, they may assume your silence means yes. A lot of people assume silence means yes. It's very convenient to assume silence means yes. And a lot of people won't ask questions because they're afraid you might say no. But understand, one of the things we're setting a boundary, you yourself have to figure out, when will I say yes, when will I say no, what do I want to do, what is it I don't want to do, what relationships do I want to invest in, how do I want to invest in those relationships, what do I see as a healthy way of interacting. I have to define all that internally, because without that you don't have a boundary, because you yourself are double-minded. And you'll send out, but people will complain, they'll say you send out mixed signals. In other words, I had a young man and he really liked this girl. That's surprising. Never hear about that, do you? And what it is that this girl on the one hand said, no, I don't want to be a girlfriend. But on the other hand, and sometimes she would encourage him to come and, do stuff with her. And so he would, of course, as any young man smitten, by the love bug, would say, oh, she's responding. And then when he would begin to move in that direction, then she would, so it was, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And she had not decided she needed to set a firm boundary and she needed to send unconfused messages. Because, of course, she didn't want to hurt him, quote unquote. But the very lack of clear communication was what was hurting him. Because he couldn't very well accept that she had said no, when at times she seemed to be saying yes. Okay? And she was most likely torn because she could see that he was sad when she said no. And so then she'd start saying yes. But then when he started to respond to yes, he would say no.
Kind of power and control.
Oh, it gets crazy.
Confused boundaries.
Confused. So that's double-mindedness. We are double-minded when we haven't decided clearly where our boundaries are. And we haven't, as Jesus said, Jesus the Messiah said, make your yes, yes, and your no, no. Anything else outside of that is evil, because you're going to confuse people. Or you're going to hurt people in some way, because you're going to be trying to force your will on them. Or you're going to be passive-aggressive and say yes and not fulfill your word. So get it straight. Figure out when you want to say yes, carefully, prayerfully, meditatively. Take 24 hours to make your decisions. and then stick with them. And, that's important. It's important so that others know where your boundaries are, and it's important so you know where your boundaries are. But understand, the codependent's right. The only way you make everyone happy is to say yes always. The only problem is you can't do it, because eventually you're going to end up breaking your word to somebody because you can't keep all that. Plus you won't want to. Okay? And at some point you'll get angry because they're not appreciating all of your sacrifice. And then we have what I call the exploding turtle. See, turtles are, animals. When there's aggression, they go inside their shell. But, and it seems like a good idea. The only trouble is when we go inside our shells, it builds a lot of pressure. And so all codependents live in microwaves. And so eventually what's happening is that the inner world is not at peace, and they're getting angry, and they're getting frustrated, and then they explode. The selfish person is more like a skunk. Okay? They will just kind of want to spray you, or worst case, a wolf. They'll just want to bite you. But the codependents are many times, turtles in microwaves, ready to blow up. And sometimes the most violent and the worst explosions come out of that. That's why a lot of times you'll find somebody will have killed themselves and everybody else, and they'll say, oh, well, they'll interview the neighbors. Oh, they were the nicest guy. Never, so calm, so quiet. Oh, yeah, they were a turtle. It's been building up for 20 years. And look out, Katie barred the door. Okay, so in other words, at the top of the page, we're now on page 2. You have to define your space and their space. Now, they're actually going to define their space, or you're going to encourage them. Understand, you're going to encourage that codependent person to say no to you because you do care about that codependent person. The very best thing you can do for that codependent person is to get them to say no. So you want them to define. You want them. You're going to encourage them to become an adult and have an opinion. Best thing you can do. Parents, how do you get your children to have an opinion? Don't tell them what to do. That takes a lot of self-control. It's asking them, well, what do you want to do? And then, in dealing with the martyr, we have to say, thank you, but you can't save me. So don't try. To the parent, we have to say, I do respect you, but you're not my father or my mother. We define the relationship.
And the martyr, I didn't
You say, I'm going to define the relationship, and it's not going to be, you're not my mother, you're not my father, we're peers. And I will be glad to listen to you as an equal adult, but don't try to order me around. And so this is, to some extent, you can think through your relationships and see maybe where some of them fall into some of these categories. Okay. Basically, the first place you have to do is you have to create a space for self-nurture. The commandment says, love yourself even, love others even as you love yourself, love your neighbor as yourself. And this means, you see, the only way you're going to have the energy to really say no is you have to create a space where you do stuff that strengthens you. Now, I can't tell you what that is. I could tell you what I do. But you have to say no to giving away time essential for your spiritual disciplines and except in a true emergency. What you need to know, what does it take for me to do to remain a sane, stable, safe, and spiritual person? That's got to be your basic boundary. You have to say, I have to know. I have one person. For them to maintain control of their temper, they have to run 2 miles a day because it burns off a lot of the anxiety. That's their boundary. And the bottom line is, if somebody says, hey, listen, don't run 2 miles a day, come meet me for breakfast, they have to say, no, I can't do that. I'll tell you another thing, how to keep your boundaries for your own self-nurture. See, American society, what is sacred is meetings. And so all you have to do is say, well, I can't do that, I have a meeting. Now, the fact that you're having a meeting with yourself, it's okay. All right? Because you're just as important as anybody else. If you're having a meeting with God, well, that's okay. Okay? If you're having a meeting with nature, that's okay. In other words, Just you. Nobody ever says, and who are you meeting? Yeah, they do. They've really crossed over boundaries at that time. The selfish guy. Who are you meeting? Yeah. Yeah. Say, well, I'm sorry. I can't tell you that. So that's where he said narrow boundary. You have to say yes to giving time to things essential for you practicing your spiritual discipline. Say no to things that damage you mentally, emotionally, or spiritually. Say yes to things that heal you mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And this could be any number of different things. I don't know. For me, one of the essential parts is when I'm really having a tough time, I eat a meatloaf. Because meatloaf is a comfort food. Now I can't tell you, you all go out there and eat meatloaves. It's not going to work for you. I tried it with my kids. They all looked at me and say, Dad, why? That's not helping me. But it helps Dad. See, your list of what helps you to be sane, stable, and spiritual, and safe, only you can work that out. That's part of it, by the way, you figuring out there's no adult to tell you what to do. You have to process that through prayerfully, carefully, but they have to give that space into your life. You have to create a place where there's a rule of life, where there's a rhythm of life, and you maintain it, because you see, human beings don't work well on empty. Okay? We have to fuel up. Again, remember, we're limited, we're weak. And I don't know why it's so hard. Part of it is under the illusion that we're going to be 24/7. Technology cannot make you 24/7. Very important. Most people in the United States have no rule of life. They don't. See, there's a difference between recreation and basically amusement. Our society has us running very fast and offers us amusement. And that is supposed to be the answer to us being tired. Now, there is a proper place for amusement in limited amounts, but we have to understand what amusement means. To muse, what does it mean to muse? Anybody know what it means to muse, the word muse? To think deeply, to carefully think. That's what it means to muse. When you put the letter A in front of another word in English, what does it mean? Without. Negative, without. No musing. Amusement means this is no thinking time. You're going to turn off your brain. And it will be so wonderful to not have a brain. And you will just benefit so much by having amusement. You'll have no brain time. Now, there is, in fact, a time that we might say, I just need a time to go into but you have to set some boundaries up for amusement time. Because you see, if you don't, that's where some of your worst actions will take place, because you are deplugging the one piece of hardware that keeps you out of trouble, that evaluates, will this be hurtful or helpful? And so to go into an amusement state is dangerous. So you want to set some confinements. You want to make sure you're in a very safe environment if you're going to amuse yourself. You want to make sure you also have limited the type of decisions you're going to make. I had a friend who was very upset with his wife and very upset with life and very upset with the world, and so one day he decided to seek some amusement, and so he took some crack cocaine. 6 years later, he finally got free of crack cocaine. One moment of amusement led into a really deadly series of addictions. Understand, there can be a limited space for amusement, but we even want to set some boundaries before we give up our head. We want to say, okay, but you're not going to do X, Y, Z, because that's just too crazy. Now, recreation's different. Notice the two sides. Like renew, creation. So recreation is us being renewed, being recreated. And what I would say is, whereas there is a limited space for amusement in our lives, there's a much bigger need for recreation in our life. So what I'm really saying is, how much time out of 100 hours a week are you going to dedicate to your recreation? That's an important issue. That may mean, and you alone can define what that means. I can't tell you, what will recreate you. You're going to have to work that out carefully, prayerfully, thoughtfully. You're going to have to come up with the answer. If you don't, by the way, other people will be glad to pressure you into amusement. Come become amused with us so we can all do crazy things. Getting into trouble seems so much smarter when you do it with someone else. And then we love company, right? So the thing is, we gotta create that, but that's a boundary. This is the most basic boundary. If you don't have this boundary, you won't have the energy to set any other boundary. If you don't just say, I'm going to have a place where I'm going to start taking care of my own soul, then you won't have the energy to do well. This is why I make it such a big deal. And most people don't have that boundary. Now there's a danger. We could put so much time into self-nurturing that we don't give anything else to others, and that would not be healthy. That would become the selfish person. So that would be the danger. The selfish person would say, well, I'm all about self-nurture. But that would be unhealthy. That would be imbalanced. The other danger is this: if we neglect self-nurture, we will crash and burn. And we will do great harm to ourselves and others. Burnout happens. It happens because people don't nurture themselves. So of all the different boundaries you need to set this. It's kind of strange. We don't think about this. In other words, you have to say no to stuff that poisons your soul. You have to make an evaluation. Is this helping my soul, hurting my soul? Is this making me a stronger person, a weaker person? Is this adding to my wounds or taking away from my wounds? And also, if you're just so busy that you have no time for yourself, that's not healthy. Because, by the way, you can lose yourself. If you can't hear yourself think anymore, you're too busy. You have to slow it down. Because if you can't hear yourself think, then it's going to be hard to run your life. Now, you must also carefully define a space for every person in your life. Sexuality and romance, from my perspective, are limited to our spouses. We say no to everyone else in that. That's a basic boundary. For single people, we must limit our sexuality, remain pure even in dating. I must define my love duty towards other people in specific, measurable, action-defined, realistic, and time-defined ways. In other words, the most important thing you have is your time. It's more important than your money. You can always get more money. You can't get any more time. For every one of us, an hourglass was turned upside down, and the sands are going through. We don't even know how much sand is in the hourglass, but there's going to come a time when there's no more sand left. So every single day, every single moment is important. And so we need to say, who are the people I want to invest my life in? You can't invest your life in everyone because you, again, are limited. And I am limited. On the next page, I give you a chart. And basically, these are the boundaries. The boundaries are, first of all, I need to have a space for God and me. I need to have my personal space. I have to have a space where I recreate myself, where I'm involved in recreation. And that has to be my most basic boundary. Then we all have an inner circle. The inner circle is going to be made up of usually a minimum of 5 and a maximum of 15 people. Some people will have seats at the table simply because of who they are. For instance, our children. They just have a seat at the table. But many people here are here because these are people we'll feel emotionally intimate with. It's because we have decided to spend at least an hour a week sharing life. If you see a teenage boy and he's, interacting with somebody else, text messaging him and calling him all the time, and they every day they spend, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half hour talking. What do you know about that teenage boy and the person that they're interacting with? Instantly. You look at their phone record, you look at their text record, and you see that, they have all this going back and forth. What do you know emotionally about those two people? They may be codependent, but actually what they are is they're having emotional intimacy. They're experiencing emotional intimacy. Emotional intimacy, one of the things that happens is when I share with someone consistently for over 90 days, the good, the bad, the ugly. The good is anything that really made me happy, and I share it with them, and the other person has empathy with me and is happy because I'm happy. The bad is something that was disappointing to me, and that other person echoes back empathy and says, boy, I'm really sorry that happened. The ugly is where I care enough for that person that I ask myself a question on a regular basis: have I done anything to hurt this person? And when the answer to my soul is yes, I have hurt this person, I actually go to that person and say, I think I may have hurt you. In other words, this is confession without nagging. It's extremely powerful. Because you see, anyone that will confess something they believe hurt me without me nagging, I know they care for me. You talk about a trust builder. Significant trust builder. Most of us have had very few occasions where that ever happened in our life because most people are hesitant to confess their lack of love. And also then the dream. Dreaming is not planning, it's just dreaming. And so we start telling people what we like to do. It could be a short-term dream. I can't wait, it's going to be great to go to California and see my children, and I'm hoping to see a lot of Alcatraz out there and all this stuff. And so you start sharing that with somebody, say, because it's something that makes you feel good thinking about it. And they again echo back saying, I am so glad that idea of the future makes you happy. By the way, we never really know the future, but we all like to have a preferred future in our head that comforts us. Now, when two people begin listening to each other, they start echoing the messages back, they start having empathy. These people are the people that are in our inner circle. And it's these people where we will reveal our true selves. And it's these people where we will take the greatest risk in a relationship. This is where we're seeking to love and receive love. Now, also the people in this circle are the ones that have the greatest capacity to hurt us. Why? Why did these people have the greater capacity to hurt us? Huh?
You've told us so much about yourself.
Right. They have a lot of information they could use if they wanted to in a hurtful way. They can say, you always, I know you, so they could use that information instead of having empathy towards you, they use it as information to attack you and judge you. Yeah. What were you going to say?
Well, trust.
Trust, yeah. The thing is, they're behind the wall. In other words, we all have walls, but they're inside the wall. And so, if a child gets mad, have you noticed children get mad? Yeah. When a child gets mad and they just say, I hate you. Well, that feels a lot worse than if the guy at Publix says, I hate you. It's like, well, I'm not happy they hate me, but I can go to another Publix, it's like, it's not a big deal, see? Because that person's not, but this person that's so close to me. So if they verbally, and then here again, it's harder for us to keep our boundaries because we want the acceptance of the people in that inner circle. And so it's much harder to say no to the people in the inner circle. It just is. Now, some people will purposely try to get into your inner circle so that they can manipulate you. In other words, it's a plan again. The selfish person knows that if they're going to, get you to do what they want you to do, they have to get inside your inner circle. And so again, unfortunately, there's some people that rather than simply, this is just, by the way, we're just set up this way. You can take us out of the village, but you can't take the village out of us. We're just, this is the way all human beings are. It's our nature. So some people know this and they'll try to use it to purposely try to get into that place. Now here are some keys. If someone who is really not, they're really a stranger, they're that outsider, you just met them. And if suddenly they start sharing extremely intimate details of their life, be careful. What are they really expecting? Yeah, for you to do the same. They're trying to, in an unnatural way, break into your inner circle. And many times it's a chosen tactic. So you have to, in fact, even a boundary would be, listen, can I just, I don't want to be rude and cut you off, but I don't know you that well. And I don't really think it's appropriate for you to be telling me about your first sexual action that you had in your life. And I really think you should, only share that with your therapist and possibly a few other close friends. But I don't know you. See, it's okay. That's setting a boundary. It's basically saying, I don't feel comfortable with this. Now, you have to determine whether you feel comfortable with it or don't feel comfortable with it. But you have to understand, to some extent, con men will, in fact, cons are always trying to get into your inner circle to manipulate you. And understand, that we actually have four, people fall into four animals. They're wolves, who are predators. And they are out to bite you, devour you, and take everything from you. There's skunks who really, they just want you, only if you threaten them, they'll make you miserable. There's turtles who try to hide inside their shells, but remember, they're all living under microwaves, so they're really time bombs. And there are termites who are passive aggressives, who will pretend to be your friends, but are really working to take it all from you. And so there's these four, two of those, the wolf and the termite, being different types. One is openly aggressive and abusive, and one is secretly aggressive and abusive. The termite's a little bit harder to figure out. But yeah, if you see that someone has a tendency to really be working behind your back in a negative way, well, then you found yourself a termite. So the next wave is your village. Now, sociologists are debating. You read one book, you get one number. You get another book, you get another number. But basically, it's between 150 and 250 people are in your village. And it used to be that our neighborhoods were our villages. It used to be geographic. This now holds my village. Our village has become electronic. And so the village is the people that know everything generally. I'm going to share. These are the people you would invite to a wedding or to a funeral. These are the people that you would feel comfortable, having them over, for dinner with, most likely a group dinner, somewhere between 10 and 15 people coming, where you want to do a bigger event. These are people that, if you're in their neighborhood and you have AAA, you call them. There's a certain amount of trust. And so these people are there. Loneliness, by the way, is to the soul what hunger is to the stomach. And loneliness is a pain that tells you, I need more people in my inner circle. So that's all it's saying. If you don't have enough people in your inner circle, if you don't have enough people of emotional intimacy, you're going to have a feeling of loneliness, and that loneliness is supposed to force you to go out and take risk in relationship. Now, some people say, well, I'd rather live with the pain of loneliness than the pain that people can bring me. And understand, 100% of your relationships will cause you pain. Because people are weak and wounded and wicked. There are no other people. And so I do know that everyone who loves me will hurt me, and I know everyone I love I will hurt. But this is why really the only thing that makes it work is forgiveness. We need to be able to repent. We need to be able to change our mind. We need to say, I'm sorry. We need to be able to because without forgiveness, every human relationship will go terminal. Because the fact is, we all are weak and wounded and wicked. It's tough being, human relationships are messy. You're messy. I'm messy. When we get together, we blend messes. But we're still called to love each other. See, the whole thing is, by totally isolating yourself from the human race, you avoid your great commission in your life, which is to love others. You can't love others if you're not with others. Cost of loving others is, yes, sometimes others will hurt you. But you see, once I accept that, once I just accept that's like gravity, once I accept that's just reality, that I don't have any control of it, and I'm not responsible for their bad actions, then I can cope with it better. To cope means to conquer. So boundaries mean I know. And see, boundaries mean I know how to spend time in self-nurture. I make time for the people that are really essential to my life. That's in our boundary. I'm going to strive to spend at least an hour a week with the people who are in my inner circle. I'm going to try to keep up to date on their good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm going to try to remain connected to their lives because I'm also saying the most important people on this planet for me to love are these 12 or 15 people. You see, that's a choice again. Because you're not God, you're not infinite, you can't love everybody. You don't have enough time. So you're going to have to choose who you're going to love. That's why you need that self-nurturing time. You got to do some planning and some processing. You also will be willing to sacrifice more, properly so, for the people in the inner circle. Because the relationship is significant. But be careful of people that are trying to weasel their way into your inner circle, because they actually want to take advantage of that reality.
Out of loneliness too.
Yes, sometimes they can be lonely, but they become aggressive in their loneliness. They decide to consume you in order to not feel lonely. But this is where we have to decide. There's decisions to be made. And we have a right to decide because you can't put all people in your inner circle. It would be inappropriate. Can't do that. You have your village. You should know who your village are. You should know. And then there's the outsiders. And you can love the outsider. You can care for the outsider, but you care for them as an outsider. And so therefore you're cared for. Now, yes, we can sacrifice things for people that are outside our circle. Jesus will say, if you're going to throw a party, throw it for a party. There are people who are most desperate and least likely to invite you to one of theirs. So there's a time of mission. There's a time, to give, food to people starving in India. And there's a time to care for people that aren't in your inner circle. And that's healthy. But it also does mean you still know they're still not in your inner circle. They're not the people that are at the core of your life. And you have to decide that out of those 100 hours, which of those, who are you going to give your life to? And by the way, every time you say yes to one person, you're saying no to another. Why? How does that work? The bottom line is if like tonight, I was invited to go up to Boca and also do some teaching in Boca. And what I had to say was, no, I'm already committed to teaching here. I can't be at two places at the same time. So my yes to you tonight meant I said no to a group of people in Boca. And if I feel guilty about not being in Boca, I am not in a healthy place. Because you see, I have to decide where am I supposed to be tonight? Am I supposed to be here or in Boca? I can't be in both. And I am not supposed to feel bad about not being in both because I'm not God. I accept myself as finite, limited.
Oftentimes I have to.
Sure, we will get false guilt. False guilt. There's several different types of false guilt, but one of the things of false guilt is feeling guilty over something that you could not do. Got to think about that for a moment. False guilt is feeling guilty over something that you could not do. I had a son come to a father and say, listen, you have to give me $500,000 because if you don't give me $500,000, my business is going to collapse. And the father didn't have $500,000. There wasn't any reason to feel guilty. The answer was, No, I can't give you, you also could buy, you might want to ask and let me see your business plan for using the $500,000. But the thing is that what you can't do, you have to inform. You can say, I regret. I could tell people, well, I regret that I cannot be there. I can have a feeling of sadness, but a feeling of sadness is not guilt. I don't feel any guilt about not being in Boca because I know I'm supposed to be here. I didn't morally fail. I didn't in some way fall short. I'm just part of being human. You can be at one place at one time. So a lot of times, you have to be very careful. Another way people try to get in your inner circle is that they will try to become, they know somebody else is in your inner circle, and they will try to network their way into your inner circle. So we need to be careful. Now, we have to understand that there is no excuse for abuse. And unfortunately, a lot of the times abuse will come to people in our inner circle. So it means this: if someone attacks us physically, we call 911. Doesn't matter how much you love them. You call 911. If someone verbally hurts us, we end the conversation. Say, I am not going to be talked to that way. We're going to cool off. I'll give you a call tomorrow and we'll pick up the topic, but this conversation's over. You do not allow someone to hurt you for 2 hours in a destructive conversation. Set a boundary. You simply say, excuse me, I will not be talked in this way. You obviously are very elevated right now. This is not a healthy conversation for us to be having, and therefore I am ending it. When both of us are calmer, we will pick this up. You have to understand, argument has never really solved anything. Because argument is, I'm going to hurt you until you say yes. And the thing is that no one keeps their word after an argument anyway, so it doesn't matter what anybody says. So the thing is argument cannot give you what you want. When you argue with someone, does that mean you trust them more? No, you in fact lose trust. Do you feel that in the middle of the argument, at the end of the argument, that person really knows that you love them and you feel loved by them, right?
This concludes CD2. Please change over to CD3.